The telegram trembled in her frozen fingers. Catherine Rose Morgan had read the words 11 times now, and still they refused to make sense. Marriage canceled. Do not come. Found someone better. Marcus Welling. 11 words. 11 words that had just destroyed her entire life. The platform at Billings Station was a sheet of ice under the December sky. Snow fell in thick, wet curtains, the kind that soaked through everything it touched. Catherine's wedding dress, her mother's wedding dress, the beautiful white silk that had crossed the Atlantic from Paris in 1860, now dragged through the slush like a funeral shroud. The hem was black with dirt and melting snow. The delicate lace her mother had worn on the happiest day of her life was ruined. Catherine couldn't feel her fingers anymore, couldn't feel her toes in the thin dancing slippers she had worn for the wedding that would never happen. She had spent 7 days on the train from Boston. 7 days dreaming of the moment Marcus would see her stepping off the platform in this dress. 7 days imagining his face, his smile, his arms opening to welcome her home. Instead, she knelt alone on frozen wood while strangers stepped around her like she was debris left by the storm. The station attendant, an older man with a weathered face and kind eyes, approached her for the third time. His boots crunched on the ice. Catherine could hear him coming, but she didn't look up. She couldn't. If she looked up, if she acknowledged the world around her, then this would be real. "Miss," he said gently. His voice carried the weight of someone who had seen too much suffering in his life. "You can't stay here like this. The cold will kill you before morning." Catherine's lips moved, but no sound came out. She tried again. "I have nowhere to go." The attendant, whose name was Ezra Jenkins, had fought in the war between the states. He had seen men die in the mud at Shiloh. He had watched boys younger than his own sons bleed out in field hospitals. He thought he had seen every kind of human suffering there was to see. But something about this young woman in a ruined wedding dress, kneeling in the snow with a telegram clutched in her blue fingers, broke something in his chest that hadn't broken in 20 years. "The last train east left 2 hours ago," he said. "Next one doesn't come through until after Christmas. That's 4 days from now." 4 days. Catherine had exactly $3.40 left in her reticule. She had spent everything else, her entire inheritance from her parents, $750, on the journey to Montana, on the wedding dress, on the traveling trunk that now sat abandoned near the freight office because she couldn't lift it and couldn't pay anyone to help her. "Do you have family here? Friends? Anyone who might take you in?" Catherine shook her head. The movement sent tears sliding down her cheeks. They froze before they reached her chin. "Then you need to get inside somewhere warm. The boarding house on 3rd Street might have a room." "I don't have money for a boarding house." Ezra Jenkins opened his mouth to offer her the $2 in his own pocket, money his wife had given him to buy Christmas presents for their grandchildren, when a child's scream cut through the wind. "Papa, Papa, I'm scared. I want Mama. Where's Mama?" Catherine's head snapped up. Through the swirling snow, she saw 2 little girls, identical twins with copper-colored hair, flying wild in the wind. They couldn't have been more than 5 years old. They were running in opposite directions on the icy platform, their small boots slipping with every step. Behind them, a tall man in a heavy rancher's coat was trying desperately to catch them both. His hat had blown off. His face was a mask of exhaustion and barely controlled panic. "Grace! Faith!" he shouted over the wind. "Stop running this instant." But the girls didn't stop. One of them, Catherine couldn't tell which, hit a patch of black ice and went down hard. The child's scream when she fell was the sound of genuine pain, high and terrified. Catherine moved without thinking. Her wedding dress tangled around her legs as she ran. Her frozen feet nearly betrayed her on the same ice that had claimed the child. But somehow she reached the fallen girl before the father did. She dropped to her knees beside the child, ignoring the cold that bit through her thin stockings. "Shh, sweetheart. Shh, let me see." The little girl looked up at her with enormous blue eyes. Tears streamed down her red cheeks. Her palms were scraped and bleeding where she had tried to catch herself. Blood mixed with snow on the wooden platform. "It hurts," the child whimpered. "My hands hurt so much." "I know, darling. I know it does." Catherine pulled a handkerchief from her sleeve. It was fine linen, embroidered with her initials and Marcus's initials intertwined, CRM and MJW. She had spent hours stitching those letters, dreaming of the life they would build together. Now she used it to wrap the child's bleeding hands with careful, gentle movements. The man finally caught up. He was breathing hard, his face flushed from cold and exertion. The other twin was tucked firmly under his arm, struggling but secure. He stopped short when he saw Catherine. "Faith, are you?" He stopped. His eyes traveled from Catherine's tear-stained face to her ruined wedding gown, to her bare hands turning blue in the cold. "Ma'am," he said after a long moment, "I don't know what to say except thank you. I'm grateful for your help." Catherine kept her eyes on the child's hands as she spoke. She scraped her palms. Nothing serious, but they should be cleaned properly. "You'll want to watch for infection." The man set down the other twin and knelt beside his injured daughter. His hands were rough and calloused from work, but they were gentle as he examined the scrapes. "Thank you, miss. I don't know what I would have done if—" He stopped. He was looking at her more carefully now, taking in the wedding dress, the telegram still clutched in one hand, the absolute devastation written on her face. "Forgive me for asking, but are you all right? You look like you've had some trouble yourself." Catherine's composure, which had held through the telegram and the cold and the ruin of everything she had hoped for, finally broke. A sob escaped before she could stop it. The sound was raw and ugly and came from somewhere deep in her chest where all the grief was stored. "I'm fine," she managed. But the lie was obvious to everyone, including the two small girls who were now staring at her with wide, worried eyes. "Why is the pretty lady crying, Papa?" the uninjured twin asked. "Hush now," the man said. But there was no sharpness in his voice, just weariness. Bone-deep weariness that Catherine recognized because she felt it too. "Is she sad because her dress is dirty?" The injured twin, Faith, had momentarily forgotten her own pain. "Mama's dresses used to get dirty too when she played with us." "Girls, that's enough." "But Papa," the first twin persisted, "she's crying harder than Faith cried when she fell down." The man stood up, lifting Faith into his arms with practiced ease. He turned to Catherine with an expression that held no judgment, only understanding, the understanding of one broken soul seeing another. "I'm James Coleman," he said quietly. "Most folks call me Cole. These are my daughters, Grace and Faith. We have a ranch about 15 miles north of here." Catherine wiped her eyes with the back of her frozen hand. "Catherine Morgan, I was supposed to—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Her throat closed around the words. Cole's gaze fell to the crumpled telegram at her feet, then back to her face. Something shifted in his expression. Recognition, perhaps, of pain, of betrayal, of the particular kind of devastation that comes from trusting someone who doesn't deserve it. "The telegram came while you were on the train," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Catherine nodded. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Cole muttered something under his breath. Then he caught himself. "Forgive my language, ma'am. I just mean to say that any man who would do that to a woman isn't worth the paper he wrote on." "Papa said a bad word," Grace observed with the brutal honesty of a 5-year-old. "Papa's sorry. Don't repeat it." Cole shifted Faith in his arms. He looked at Catherine with those striking blue eyes, eyes that held pain of their own. Old pain, the kind that never quite fades. "Miss Morgan, do you have somewhere to go? Family here in Billings?" Catherine shook her head slowly. The movement felt like it took all her strength. "I have nothing. I spent everything I had on the journey west." A long moment passed. The wind howled across the platform. Grace and Faith shivered in their father's arms. Cole seemed to be wrestling with something. Propriety, perhaps, or common sense, or the ghost of whatever had put that old grief in his eyes. Finally, he spoke. "Miss Morgan, I'm not a man who asks for help easy, and I'm not one to impose on a stranger, especially one going through what you're going through." He paused, adjusted Faith's weight in his arms. "But I'm desperate. These two girls, they lost their mother 22 months ago. Fever took her. Since then, I've been trying to raise them and run the ranch, and I'm failing at both." Catherine blinked at him through her tears. "I don't understand. I've had 3 governesses quit in the last year," Cole continued. "The first one said the girls were unmanageable. The second one left after 2 months, said she couldn't handle the isolation. The third one lasted 2 weeks before she ran back to Helena, claiming the girls were disturbed and needed to be locked away in an institution." "Papa," Faith whimpered, burying her face in his neck. "I don't want another mean lady." Cole kissed her copper hair. I know, sweetheart. He looked back at Catherine. These girls need someone. They need a woman who will be patient with them, teach them proper, help them remember how to smile again. I saw what you did just now. You ran to help a crying child without thinking twice. You wrapped my daughter's hands with your own wedding handkerchief. Mr. Coleman, Catherine started. I'm not asking you to marry me, Cole said quickly. His weather-tanned cheeks flushed. That's not what this is. I'm asking you to consider a position. Governess and teacher for my daughters, room and board included, $50 a month, which I know is generous, but I'm willing to pay it. Mrs. Yang, our housekeeper, lives in the main house. Everything would be proper and respectable. Catherine stared at him. The wind whipped her ruined wedding gown around her legs. Her fingers had gone completely numb. She couldn't feel her toes at all. You don't know me, she said finally. I could be anyone. I could be dangerous. You could be the woman who just ran through a blizzard to help a crying child, Cole interrupted. You could be the woman who wrapped my daughter's hands with her own wedding handkerchief without thinking twice about ruining it. You could be exactly what my girls need, what this family needs. Faith lifted her head from her father's shoulder and looked at Catherine with heartbreakingly hopeful eyes. Are you going to come home with us, pretty lady? Catherine felt something crack open inside her chest. Not the crack of breaking. She was already broken. This was something different, something like light finding its way through the shattered pieces. I need time to think, she heard herself say. Cole nodded, but his eyes flickered to the darkening sky. Storm's coming in hard, Miss Morgan. That last train east won't run again until Thursday. Maybe later, with this weather. Town's got one boarding house, and Mrs. Patterson, who runs it, is particular about who she takes in. Forgive me for saying so, ma'am, but you look like you've been through a war. Catherine looked down at herself. Her dress was torn and mud-stained. Her hair had fallen from its careful arrangement. Her face was tear-streaked and wind-burned. Mrs. Patterson would take one look at her and slam the door. I don't have money for a boarding house anyway, Catherine admitted quietly. Then come with us, Cole said. Just for tonight. Get warm. Get fed. Tomorrow, if you want to leave, I'll bring you back to town myself and help you figure out your next step. No obligations, no strings. Just one night to get out of this cold before it kills you. The twins were both looking at her now. Identical expressions of desperate hope on their small faces. How long had it been since these children had known a woman's tenderness? How long since they'd been tucked in at night with a lullaby? 22 months, Cole had said. 22 months since their mother died. Catherine thought of her own mother, gone these 5 years now. She thought of the empty space that loss had left inside her, a space she had tried to fill with the promise of marriage, of family, of belonging. That promise had just turned to ash in her hands. But perhaps this was something else. Perhaps this was what her mother would have wanted her to do. Help children who had no mother. Find purpose in the wreckage. One night, she heard herself say, I'll come for one night. Relief flooded Cole's face like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Thank you, Miss Morgan. You won't regret it. As they walked toward his wagon, Grace slipped her small hand into Catherine's frozen fingers. Your hands are cold, the little girl said. Mama's hands used to get cold too. Papa said I was her hand warmer. Catherine's throat tightened with emotion. That's a very important job. I can be your hand warmer too if you want, Grace offered. Behind them, Cole was loading Catherine's trunk onto the wagon with help from Ezra Jenkins, who had appeared from the station office with a concerned expression. His movements were quick and efficient despite the howling wind. Faith had been settled on the wagon bench, wrapped in a thick wool blanket. Catherine looked down at Grace, this small, motherless Joan who was offering comfort to a stranger even though her own heart was surely still broken. I would like that very much, Catherine whispered. Grace's face split into a smile. It was the first genuine smile Catherine had seen on either twin. It transformed the child's whole face, made her look like the carefree little girl she should have been. Faith, Grace called to her sister. She's staying. The pretty lady is staying. Cole helped Catherine onto the wagon bench. His hand was steady under her elbow. Up close, she could see the lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the gray threading through his dark hair, the calluses on his palms that spoke of endless hard work. This man was carrying the world on his shoulders, and somehow, impossibly, he had found room to carry one more broken thing. 15 miles in this weather, he said, climbing up beside her and taking the reins. Going to be a cold ride. Girls, get under that blanket proper. As the wagon lurched forward, Catherine pulled Grace close and wrapped part of her ruined wedding gown around the child for extra warmth. Faith scooted across the bench until she was pressed against Catherine's other side. Within minutes, both girls were asleep, their small bodies warm against her. Cole glanced over. Something in his expression softened. They trust you, he said quietly. They don't trust Easy anymore. Not since their mama. Children often see more than adults give them credit for, Catherine replied. You sound like you know something about children. Catherine nodded, remembering. I taught at a music academy for girls in Boston for 3 years before I came west. Piano mostly, but also singing and music theory. Cole's eyebrows rose. A music teacher? Now that's a stroke of fortune. I don't believe in fortune anymore, Mr. Coleman. Call me Cole. And I didn't believe in much of anything either after my wife died. He was quiet for a long moment. The only sound was the crunch of wheels on snow and the whistle of wind through the Montana wilderness. The storm was worsening. Snow came down so thick that Catherine could barely see the horse's ears. But Cole navigated with the confidence of a man who knew this land in his bones. But then I was standing on that platform today, Cole continued, watching my girls run wild, knowing I couldn't catch them both, knowing I was failing them in ways their mama never would have. He trailed off. But Catherine understood, and I appeared, she finished, in a wedding dress, crying your eyes out. And still the first thing you did was help a child who wasn't yours. Cole shook his head. If that's not Providence, Miss Morgan, I don't know what is. They rode in silence for a while. Catherine's eyes grew heavy despite the cold. The rhythmic movement of the wagon, the warmth of the children pressed against her. The knowledge that for the first time in 7 days, she wasn't alone. Tell me about them, she said finally. The girls. Cole's face softened in that way it did whenever he looked at his daughters. Grace is the older one by about 2 minutes. She's the brave one. Too brave sometimes. Runs toward trouble instead of away from it. Last summer she climbed onto the barn roof because she wanted to see the sunset from up high. Fell and broke her arm, scared me half to death. And Faith? Faith's the tender heart. Feels everything deeper than she should. After Margaret died, Grace threw tantrums and broke things. But Faith just went quiet, stopped eating for a while. That scared me more than Grace's raging ever did. They seem better now, Catherine observed. They have good days and bad days, more bad than good lately. Cole's jaw tightened. The last governess, Mrs. Harmon, told me the girls were disturbed, said they needed to be sent to some institution back east where they could be properly managed, said she'd never seen children so wild and disrespectful. Catherine felt a flash of anger. She sounds like a woman who never lost anything precious. Cole looked at her sharply. That's exactly what I thought. But I didn't have the words for it until just now. Children grieve differently than adults, Catherine said. They don't have the words for their pain, so it comes out in other ways. Running, screaming, going silent. It doesn't mean they're disturbed. It means they're human. Something shifted in Cole's eyes. Something like hope, carefully guarded but unmistakably there. You really were a good teacher, weren't you? Before Catherine could answer, the wagon crested a small hill. Through the driving snow, she caught her first glimpse of the Coleman Ranch. Even through the storm, she could see it was substantial. A large house built from logs, but not a simple cabin. This was a mansion by frontier standards. 3 stories tall, with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Smoke rose from multiple chimneys. Warm light glowed from several windows, cutting through the darkness like promises of warmth and safety. Several outbuildings clustered around a central yard. She could make out what looked like stables housing dozens of fine horses, a massive barn, multiple corrals, and a bunkhouse for the ranch hands. In the distance, dark shapes moved in organized herds. Even through the snow, Catherine could tell these were not ordinary cattle ranches. This was Coleman Horse Ranch, one of the largest suppliers of cavalry horses to the United States Army, a business built on the foundation of his father's gold strike and Cole's own sharp business mind. It had made him one of the wealthiest men in Montana Territory. But what struck Catherine most wasn't the size of the property. It was that warm light in the windows. Light that meant people were inside waiting. Light that meant this place was loved and lived in and cared for. Home, Cole said. And despite everything, the fear and the uncertainty and the exhaustion, there was pride in his voice. It's not much compared to city living, but it's beautiful, Catherine interrupted. And she meant it. The front door of the house burst open before they even reached it. A small, elderly woman emerged, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders as she hurried toward them despite the storm. "Mr. Cole," she called out in accented English. "You are late. I was worried sick." She spotted Catherine on the wagon bench and stopped short. Her eyes took in the wedding dress, the tear-stained face, the obvious state of shock. "And who is this?" she asked. "Mrs. Yang, this is Miss Catherine Morgan." Cole climbed down and began lifting the sleeping twins from the wagon. "She's going to be staying with us for a while. She'll be helping with the girls." Mrs. Yang's sharp eyes missed nothing. But unlike the curious stares Catherine had received at the station, there was no judgment in the older woman's gaze. Only understanding. Only kindness. "Come inside, Miss Morgan," Mrs. Yang said, reaching up to help Catherine down. "You look frozen straight through. I have soup on the stove and the fire is burning high." "Thank you," Catherine whispered. Her voice broke on the words. "Thank you so much." As she stepped across the threshold of the Coleman house, the warmth hit her like a physical embrace. She hadn't realized how cold she was, how numb, until suddenly she wasn't anymore. Cole carried the twins upstairs while Mrs. Yang bustled Catherine toward the fire. The housekeeper was clucking about wet clothes and frozen fingers and the foolishness of traveling in winter without proper preparation. "Sit, sit," Mrs. Yang commanded. "I will bring you soup and we will find you something warm to wear." "That dress," she shook her head, her expression sad. "I am sorry, miss. Whatever happened today, I am sorry." The kindness in her voice was too much. Catherine had held herself together through the telegram, through the platform, through the wagon ride, but this simple compassion from a stranger undid her completely. She began to cry, great racking sobs that shook her whole body. All the pain and shock and grief that she had been holding at bay came flooding out in a torrent she couldn't control. Mrs. Yang didn't say a word. She simply sat beside Catherine and held her hand while she wept. That was how Cole found them when he came back downstairs. The broken woman in the ruined wedding dress crying by the fire. The old housekeeper bearing witness to her pain. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching. Then he turned and walked silently to his study, leaving Catherine to grieve in peace. But through the crack in the door, he could still hear her crying, and something in his own carefully guarded heart began to crack open too. It was close to midnight when Catherine finally stopped crying. Mrs. Yang had given her a cup of warm milk laced with honey, had helped her change into a borrowed nightgown and robe, had settled her in a chair by the dying fire. "The girls are asking for you," the old woman said gently. "They woke up and wanted to make sure the pretty lady was still here." Catherine looked up, surprised. "They did? They are afraid you will disappear like—" Mrs. Yang stopped herself. "Like others have." "I'll go to them," Catherine said. "Miss Morgan, you do not have to. You have been through enough today." But Catherine was already standing. "Which room?" Mrs. Yang led her upstairs to a door decorated with painted flowers. Delicate pink roses and blue forget-me-nots. Someone had spent hours on this door. Margaret probably. Done when the girls were babies. Back when the future seemed bright and full of promise. Inside, two small beds sat side by side. Two pairs of blue eyes glowed in the lamplight. "You stayed," Faith whispered. "I stayed," Catherine confirmed. She sat on the edge of Faith's bed. Immediately, both girls climbed into her lap, their small arms wrapping around her neck with desperate strength. "Will you sing to us?" Grace asked. "Mama used to sing to us." Catherine's throat tightened. "What did your mama sing?" "All kinds of songs, but our favorite was the one about the mockingbird." Catherine knew that one. Her own mother had sung it to her a lifetime ago. Softly, she began to sing. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird." The twins' eyes drifted closed as she sang. Their small bodies relaxed against her. Their breathing grew deep and even. When the song was finished, Catherine carefully eased them into their beds and pulled the quilts up to their chins. She kissed each small forehead. "Good night, little ones," she whispered. She turned to leave and found Cole standing in the doorway. His face was half in shadow. "I haven't heard anyone sing to them since Margaret," he said quietly. "They stopped asking after the first governess told them they were too old for lullabies." "No one is too old for comfort," Catherine replied. Cole nodded slowly. Then after a long pause, the trial period. "One night, you said, you can still leave in the morning. I'll keep my word." Catherine looked back at the sleeping twins. Faith had thrown one arm over the edge of the bed, reaching toward her sister. Grace had curled into a ball, her thumb creeping toward her mouth. These children were healing from wounds that would mark them forever. They needed patience. They needed consistency. They needed love. And Catherine needed something to give herself to. Something real and good and worth fighting for. "I'll stay for 2 weeks," she heard herself say. "A proper trial period. If it doesn't work, I'll go, but I'd like to try." Relief flooded Cole's face, followed by something that looked almost like hope. 2 weeks. "Thank you, Miss Morgan." "Catherine." He looked at her questioningly. "If I'm going to be living in your pumpkin, you should call me Catherine." "Catherine," he repeated. The way he said her name, soft and almost reverent, sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. That night, in the small guest room with its handmade quilts and simple furniture, Catherine lay awake for a long time. She listened to the wind howl outside, to the house settle around her, to the distant sound of horses moving in their stalls. 24 hours ago, she had been on a train heading toward a wedding, toward a future she had planned and hoped for and believed in with every fiber of her being. Now that future was gone, burned to ash by 11 words in a telegram. But in its place, something unexpected was taking root. 2 little girls who needed her. A grieving father who had reached out in desperation and found perhaps more than he had bargained for. And Catherine herself, broken and raw, and somehow impossibly beginning to hope again. The storm outside was worsening. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new uncertainties, new reasons to doubt. But tonight, for the first time in months, Catherine Morgan fell asleep with something other than fear in her heart. She fell asleep with possibility. Morning came too soon. Embers and thorns. Catherine woke to chaos. Catherine woke to the sound of small feet thundering past her door, followed by Mrs. Yang's exasperated voice calling after the twins in a mix of English and Chinese. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then the memories crashed back. The telegram, the station, the desperate father and his wild-haired daughters. She sat up slowly, her body aching from the cold and exhaustion of the previous day. Pale winter light filtered through the frost-covered window. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world blanketed in white that stretched as far as she could see. A soft knock on her door made her pull the quilt higher. "Miss Catherine, Mrs." Yang's voice was gentle. "Breakfast in 20 minutes. The girls are asking for you. I'll be right down," Catherine called back. She dressed quickly in the borrowed clothes Mrs. Yang had left for her, a simple wool dress in deep gray. It fit well enough, though it was slightly loose in the waist. Catherine suspected it had belonged to Margaret. No one said so, but she could tell by the way Mrs. Yang's eyes lingered on it when she came downstairs. The kitchen was chaos. Grace was standing on a chair, attempting to reach a jar of preserves on the highest shelf. Faith was crying in the corner, clutching a rag doll with one arm missing. And Cole was trying to reason with both of them while simultaneously burning something on the stove. "Grace Coleman, get down from there this instant." "But I want jam, Papa." "Mrs. Yang said we couldn't have jam, but I want it. Your sister is crying." "Don't you care about your sister? She's always crying," Grace shot back with the brutal honesty of a 5-year-old. "She cries about everything." Catherine cleared her throat. All 3 Colemans turned to look at her. Grace froze on the chair. Cole's face flushed with embarrassment, and Faith ran straight to Catherine, throwing her arms around her legs. "My dolly broke," the child sobbed. "Her arm came off and now she's broken and I can't fix her. And Grace said she's garbage now and should be thrown away." Catherine knelt down, cupping Faith's tearful face in her hands. "May I see the dolly?" Faith held up the damaged toy. The arm had come loose at the shoulder seam. The stitching had worn through from years of love and play. "This is an easy fix," Catherine said calmly. "I can mend her this afternoon. She'll be good as new." Faith's eyes widened. You can fix her? Really? Really, I'm quite good with a needle. Catherine looked up at Grace, still frozen on the chair. And you, young lady, please climb down from there before you fall and break something that can't be mended. Grace hesitated. She was clearly not used to being spoken to with such calm authority. Now please, Catherine added. Her tone brooked no argument. Something in Catherine's voice made Grace obey. She climbed down carefully, her small face hull in but compliant. I just wanted jam, she muttered. Then you should have asked properly instead of climbing furniture like a barn cat, Catherine said. She stood, keeping one hand on Faith's shoulder. Mrs. Yang said no jam. That means no jam. But perhaps if you both behave nicely during breakfast, we can discuss having some with your lunch. The twins exchanged glances. That silent communication of siblings who had been through everything together. You promise? Grace asked suspiciously. I don't make promises I can't keep. I said we can discuss it. That means if you eat your breakfast without complaint, and if you're kind to each other and to Mrs. Yang, then we'll talk about jam later. Cole was staring at Catherine like she had performed some kind of magic trick. The burnt smell from the stove finally registered, and he cursed under his breath, rushing to pull a blackened pan off the heat. Mr. Cole, Mrs. Yang said, appearing from the pantry with a bowl of eggs. I told you I would handle breakfast. You have burned the bacon again. I was trying to help. You helped by going to check on the cattle. I helped by cooking food that is actually edible. Despite herself, Catherine smiled. There was an easy affection between Cole and his housekeeper, the kind that came from years of working side by side through hardship. Cole caught her smile, and something in his tired face softened. I see you've already got them in hand, he said quietly, moving closer. Better than I ever manage. How'd you do that? Children want boundaries, Catherine replied, even when they fight against them. It makes them feel safe. Cole was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. Margaret always said something similar. I never quite understood what she meant until now. The mention of his late wife hung in the air between them. Catherine wasn't sure what to say, so she simply nodded and turned her attention back to the twins, who were now seated at the table with exaggerated good behavior. Breakfast was simple but filling. Eggs, toast, and oatmeal with honey. The twins ate without complaint, their eyes darting to Catherine every few bites as if checking whether she was keeping track of their good behavior. She was. When the plates were cleared, Grace asked hopefully about the jam. You did well at breakfast, both of you, Catherine smiled. I'll speak with Mrs. Yang about jam at lunch. Both girls beamed. Cole rose from the table, reaching for his coat and hat. I need to ride out and check the herd. Storm like last night's can scatter cattle for miles. He paused, looking at Catherine. Will you be all right here with them? We'll be fine. I thought we might start with some lessons this morning, if that's acceptable. Cole's eyebrows rose. Lessons? Already? Reading, writing, basic arithmetic. You mentioned wanting them to have a proper education. I did. I just didn't expect you to start so soon. Catherine shrugged. No time like the present. Something flickered in Cole's eyes. Gratitude maybe, or wonder. You're remarkable, you know that? The compliment caught her off guard. Heat rose to her cheeks and she looked away. I'm just doing what needs to be done. That's what makes it remarkable. He tipped his hat to her and headed for the door. I'll be back by midday. Mrs. Yang knows where to find me if there's trouble. After he left, Catherine turned to find both twins watching her with identical expressions of curiosity. Papa looked at you funny, Grace announced. Did he? Catherine asked. Like he looks at Mama's picture sometimes. All soft and sad. Catherine's heart clenched. She didn't know how to respond to that, so she changed the subject. Who wants to show me what you already know how to read? The morning passed faster than Catherine expected. The twins, for all their wildness, were sharp as tacks. Grace could read simple sentences, though she rushed through them impatiently. Faith was slower but more careful, sounding out each word with determined concentration. Their arithmetic was shakier. They could count well enough, but the concept of adding and subtracting was still fuzzy. Their penmanship was atrocious. My hand gets tired, Grace complained when Catherine asked her to write her name. Then we'll practice in short bursts. A little every day is better than a lot all at once. That's what Mama used to say, Faith said softly, about practicing piano. Catherine paused. Your mama played piano? Both girls nodded eagerly. Grace pointed toward the corner of the parlor where Catherine now noticed a large object covered with a black cloth. Papa covered it up after she died, Grace explained. He said the sound made him too sad. Catherine looked at the shrouded instrument and felt a pang of recognition. After her own mother died, her father had packed away all her dresses, her jewelry, her books, as if removing the reminders could somehow remove the pain. It never worked. The absence only made the grief louder. Maybe someday, Catherine said carefully. Your papa might want to hear music again when he's ready. Grace shook her head firmly. He's never ready. He's always sad. Even when he smiles, his eyes are sad. Out of the mouths of babes. Children saw everything. Grief takes time, Catherine said. There's no rushing it. What's grief? Faith asked. It's the sad feeling you have when someone you love goes away and can't come back. Faith considered this. Like when Mama went into heaven? Yes, exactly like that. Do you have grief, Miss Catherine? The question caught Catherine off guard. She looked into Faith's earnest blue eyes and saw no guile there. Only genuine curiosity. Yes, she admitted. I do. Who went to heaven? My mama and papa. A long time ago now. The twins exchanged one of their silent looks. Then you understand, Grace said finally. The governesses before, they didn't understand. They got mad when we were sad about Mama. They said we should be over it by now. Catherine felt a flash of anger at these unknown women who had failed these children so completely. You never have to be over losing someone you love, she said firmly. You learn to carry the sadness, and eventually it gets lighter, but it never goes away completely. And that's okay. It means your love was real. Faith crawled into her lap without asking permission. Grace, after a moment's hesitation, moved closer too, leaning against Catherine's arm. They stayed that way for a long time. Three grieving souls finding comfort in each other's presence. Cole returned at midday, his face red from the cold, his coat dusted with snow. He stopped short when he saw Catherine sitting on the parlor rug with both twins, a book open between them. The Snow Queen, Grace announced proudly. Miss Catherine is reading it to us. It's about a girl who has to save her friend from an ice witch. Is that so? Cole shed his coat and boots and joined them, settling into his worn armchair. Gerda is very brave, Faith added. She walks through snow for miles and miles to save Kay. For a few minutes, Cole just listened as Catherine continued the story. Her voice rose and fell with the drama of the tale. When she reached a natural stopping point, Grace immediately demanded more. After lunch, Catherine said, we had a deal about jam, remember? The twins scrambled up and raced toward the kitchen. Cole remained seated, watching Catherine with an expression she couldn't quite read. You're good with them, he said quietly. Better than good, natural. I taught children for 3 years. I know how they think. It's more than that. Cole leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. The other governesses, they tried to manage the girls, control them. You're different. You're actually connecting with them. Catherine closed the book and set it aside. Your daughters aren't wild, Cole. They're grieving and scared and testing everyone to see who will stay. Every time someone new comes and then leaves, it confirms their worst fear, that everyone they love will eventually abandon them. Cole flinched as if she had struck on him. I hadn't thought of it that way. Children rarely have the words to explain their feelings. They show them through behavior instead. Grace's running and climbing and rule-breaking. Faith's tears and clinginess. It's all the same thing underneath, fear. How do I fix it? The rawness in his voice made Catherine's heart ache. Here was a man who had lost his wife, who was raising 2 small children alone while running a ranch, who was trying his best and still felt like he was failing. You can't fix grief, she said gently. You can only be present, be consistent, show up day after day even when they push you away. Eventually they'll learn to trust again. Cole was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. After Margaret died, I wanted to crawl into a hole and never come out. But I had the girls and I had the ranch, so I kept going, one foot in front of the other. Some days that's all I could manage. That's all anyone can ask, one foot in front of the other. He met her eyes. You understand. You really understand. I told you I've lost people too. Cole nodded slowly. The man who sent that telegram, the one you were supposed to marry. Tell me about him. The request surprised Catherine. Most people avoided the topic, not wanting to cause her further pain. But Cole asked like he genuinely wanted to know. His name was Marcus Welling, she began. We met through correspondence. A mutual acquaintance gave him my name. He wrote beautiful letters about his life out west, about the future we would build together. We corresponded for 18 months. And then? And then I sold everything I own, spent my entire inheritance on a train ticket, and traveled 3,000 miles to marry him, only to receive a telegram at the station telling me he'd found someone better. Cole's jaw tightened. Do you know who? No. And I don't want to know. Catherine folded her hands in her lap. The truth is, Marcus did me a favor. Better to learn who he really was before the wedding than after. But the humiliation of it, the waste of everything I'd sacrificed. You deserved better. Perhaps, or perhaps I was foolish to trust a man I'd never actually met in person. There's nothing foolish about hope, Cole said fiercely. There's nothing foolish about believing someone when they tell you they love you. The fault is his, not yours. Never yours. The intensity of his defense surprised her. She looked at him and saw not pity, but genuine anger on her behalf. Thank you for saying that. I mean every word. He stood abruptly, as if embarrassed by his own emotion. I should wash up for lunch. The girls will want their jam. He left the room and Catherine sat alone for a moment, processing what had just happened. Cole Coleman was not what she had expected. He was rough around the edges, worn down by grief and hard work. But underneath that weathered exterior was a kind heart and a fierce loyalty. Dangerous qualities, she thought, the kind that made a woman forget her better judgment. 3 days passed in a rhythm that felt almost comfortable. Catherine woke each morning to the sound of the twins arguing, or laughing, or running through the halls. She taught them their letters and numbers. She mended Faith's doll and helped Grace practice her penmanship. She ate meals with the family and listened to Cole's quiet observations about the ranch, the weather, the state of the herd. But on the fourth morning, everything changed. Catherine was helping Mrs. Yang prepare breakfast when Cole burst through the front door, his face grim. In his hand was a letter that looked like it had traveled a long distance. Mrs. Yang, where are the girls? Still sleeping, the housekeeper replied, alarmed by his tone. Good. Keep them upstairs for a few minutes. Cole turned to Catherine. Miss Catherine, I need to speak with you, now, in private. His tone brooked no argument. Catherine followed him to his study, her heart beginning to pound. Had something happened to the ranch? To the cattle? Cole closed the door behind them and handed her the letter. It was addressed to her in unfamiliar handwriting. The return address was Boston. This arrived with the postwriter this morning, Cole said. It's from a lawyer in Boston, a Mr. Edward Harrington. Catherine's hands shook as she opened the envelope. Inside was a single page written in precise legal script. As she read, the blood drained from her face. Dear Miss Morgan, the letter began, I regret to inform you of the death of your grandmother, Mrs. Evelyn Morgan, who passed away on the 18th of November, 1885. As the executor of her estate, it is my duty to inform you of the contents of her will. Catherine's grandmother, she had barely known the woman. Her father's mother had cut off all contact with the family when Catherine's father married beneath his station. Catherine's mother had been the daughter of a shopkeeper, not good enough for the Morgan family of Boston. The letter continued, Mrs. Morgan has left you the sum of $12,000, as well as the Morgan family estate on Beacon Hill. However, there are conditions attached to this bequest. Catherine's eyes widened. $12,000. It was a fortune, more money than she had ever dreamed of having. You must be married before your 25th birthday, which according to our records is the 15th of April, 1886. Should you fail to meet this condition, the entirety of the estate will be donated to the Episcopal Church Charitable Fund. The letter went on to provide additional details about the property, the investments, the legal requirements. But Catherine could barely focus on the words. Her 25th birthday was in 10 weeks. 10 weeks to find a husband or lose everything. She looked up at Cole. His expression was carefully neutral. There's more, he said quietly. That's not the only letter that came today. He handed her a second envelope. This one was from Marcus Welling. Catherine's hands shook harder as she opened it. The letter inside was short and to the point. My dearest Catherine, it began, and she felt bile rise in her throat at the endearment. I have recently become aware of your change in circumstances. I believe there has been a terrible misunderstanding between us. The telegram you received was sent in error by my clerk, who was under the mistaken impression that our engagement had been called off. Nothing could be further from the truth. I eagerly await your return to Billings so that we may proceed with our wedding plans as originally discussed. Time is, as I understand, of the essence given the terms of your grandmother's will. It was signed, with deepest affection, Marcus J. Welling. Catherine crumpled the letter in her fist. He knew, she whispered. He knew about the inheritance all along. That's why he proposed in the first place. But how? Catherine's voice shook. How could he have known? The will was only read after my grandmother died in November. I didn't even know about it until this letter arrived. Cole's face darkened. He pulled out another sheet of paper that had been tucked inside the envelope from the lawyer. It was a copy of a telegraph receipt dated 6 months earlier. The message read, "Confirm Evelyn Morgan estate details and inheritance conditions. Urgent reply needed. Marcus J. Welling, Billings, Montana Territory." Catherine felt the blood drain from her face. He knew. He knew before he even proposed to me, before he wrote those beautiful letters. He must have paid someone in Boston to investigate my family. Cole's jaw tightened. He was never going to marry you. He was planning this from the start. Get you out here, cancel at the last moment, leave you desperate and stranded, then swoop in as your savior when you had no other choice. And now that you're out here with no money and no way home, he thinks you'll come crawling back to him. I won't, Catherine said fiercely. I'd rather lose every penny than give that man the satisfaction. But even as she said it, she felt the weight of reality pressing down on her. $12,000. The Morgan estate. It was more than just money. It was security, independence, the ability to make her own choices for the rest of her life. And she had 10 weeks to marry or lose it all. There's something else you should know, Cole said. He pulled out a third letter. This one is from my business manager in San Francisco. The investors who hold shares in my ranch operations are threatening to call a vote to remove me from management. They claim I'm not mentally fit to run the business. Catherine looked at him in shock. Can they do that? They can try. I own the majority of shares, but if they can prove I'm unstable or incompetent, they can petition the territorial court to appoint a conservator. Cole's jaw tightened. I've been ignoring the business side of things since Margaret died. The ranch itself is doing fine, but the expansion plans, the contracts with the cavalry, all of that has fallen behind. They have grounds to question my competence. What will you do? I don't know. Cole ran a hand through his hair. I need to prove to them that I'm stable, that I'm moving forward with my life instead of drowning in grief. But I don't know how to do that when most days I can barely get out of bed. They stood in silence for a long moment. Two people drowning in their separate problems, unaware that the solution might be standing right in front of them. It was Catherine who spoke first. What if we helped each other? Cole looked at her questioningly. You need to prove you're moving forward with your life, Catherine said slowly. I need to be married within 10 weeks or lose my inheritance. What if we married each other? The words hung in the air like a physical thing. A marriage of convenience, Catherine continued quickly. A business arrangement. You get proof that you're stable and moving forward. I keep my inheritance. After 6 months, we can dissolve the marriage quietly. No one needs to know it was anything other than genuine. Cole stared at her. Catherine, that's practical, she interrupted. It's practical. We both get what we need, and it would be legal and proper. Mrs. Yang could continue to live here as chaperone. Nothing would have to change except the legal documents. What about the girls? Cole asked quietly. They're already getting attached to you. If you leave after 6 months, we'll explain it to them when the time comes, Catherine said, though her heart clenched at the thought. We'll make sure they understand it has nothing to do with them. Cole walked to the window, looking out at the snow-covered landscape. Catherine could see him wrestling with the decision. She held her breath, waiting. Finally, he turned back to her. If we do this, there would have to be rules. Clear boundaries. Of course, Catherine agreed quickly. Separate bedrooms, no expectations of marital relations, understood. And if at any point either of us wants to end the arrangement early, we can. No questions asked. Catherine nodded. Those all seem like reasonable terms. Cole studied her face for a long moment. Why are you willing to do this? You barely know me. Because you're a good man, Catherine said simply. Because you've shown me more kindness in 4 days than Marcus showed me in 18 months. Because I trust you to keep your word. And because those two little girls upstairs deserve to have their father functioning again, and if marrying me helps you do that, then it's worth it. Something shifted in Cole's expression. Something warm and grateful and almost tender. All right, he said. Let's do it. They were married 3 days later in the small office of Judge Henry Blake in Billings. It was nothing like the wedding Catherine had once imagined. No white dress, no flowers, no music. Just Cole in his best suit, Catherine in a simple blue dress that Mrs. Yang had altered to fit her, and two very excited little girls who didn't understand why they couldn't tell anyone about the wedding yet. Mrs. Yang and Red Harrison, Cole's ranch foreman, served as witnesses. Judge Blake, an old friend of Cole's late father, performed the ceremony with efficient professionalism. Do you, James Coleman, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, until death do you part? I do. Cole's voice was steady, but Catherine could feel his hand trembling slightly in hers. And do you, Catherine Rose Morgan, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, until death do you part? I do. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Montana, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Judge Blake smiled. You may kiss your bride. The kiss was brief and chaste, lips barely touching, but even that small contact sent a jolt through Catherine's body that she tried very hard to ignore. After signing the marriage certificate, they returned to the ranch in silence. Grace and Faith chattered excitedly in the back of the wagon, but Cole and Catherine were both lost in their own thoughts. That night, after the girls were asleep, Cole found Catherine in the parlor. She was staring at the covered piano, her expression thoughtful. We should establish the household arrangements, he said formally. You'll keep the guest room you have been using. My room is at the end of the hall. Mrs. Yang's is on the first floor near the kitchen. Catherine nodded. That sounds appropriate. We'll need to make a public announcement soon, Cole continued. Let people in town know about the marriage. It would look strange if we kept it secret. How much should we tell them? The truth, mostly. That we married quickly and quietly because of the terms of your grandmother's will. People will understand that. Frontier pragmatism. And after 6 months? Cole was quiet for a moment. We'll figure that out when we get there. He turned to leave, then stopped. Catherine, thank you for agreeing to this. I know it's not what you wanted when you came west. Nothing has been what I wanted, Catherine said softly. But maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe what I wanted wasn't what I needed. Cole looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded and left her alone with her thoughts. Catherine stood and walked to the covered piano. Slowly, she pulled the cloth away, revealing the beautiful instrument beneath. It was a Steinway, probably shipped at great expense from New York. The wood was rich and dark. The ivory keys yellowed slightly with age, but still beautiful. She sat down on the bench and touched the keys gently. The sound that emerged was out of tune, but still recognizable. The piano hadn't been played in almost 2 years, but it was still a fine instrument. It could be restored, just like this family, she thought, damaged but not destroyed. Waiting for someone patient enough to bring it back to life. She didn't hear Cole return until he spoke from the doorway. I haven't heard that sound in 22 months. Catherine turned, startled. I'm sorry, I should have asked. No, Cole said. He walked into the room and stood beside the piano. No, it's good. Margaret would have hated the thought of it sitting silent. Tell me about her, Catherine said softly. Cole ran his hand along the piano's edge. She was the daughter of a wealthy merchant in San Francisco. Her family had money and position. Everything I didn't have. I was just the son of a blacksmith who got lucky finding gold. But you loved her. I loved her more than anything. And somehow, miraculously, she loved me too. We eloped to Nevada to get married because her parents refused to give their blessing. They never forgave her for marrying beneath her station. When she died, they didn't even come to the funeral. Catherine's heart ached for him, for Margaret, for the cruelty of families who valued pride over love. She was lucky to have you, Catherine said, and you were lucky to have her. I was. Cole sat down on the bench beside her. The space was narrow and their shoulders touched. For 22 months, I've been trying to figure out how to live without her, and I still don't know. You're doing better than you think, Catherine said. You're taking care of your daughters. You're running the ranch. You're putting one foot in front of the other. Is that enough? Sometimes that's all there is. They sat in silence for a moment, then Cole reached out and played a single note. It was badly out of tune. Can you fix it? He asked. Catherine smiled. I think so. My father used to repair pianos. He taught me before he died. Cole looked at her with something like wonder in his eyes. You continue to surprise me, Catherine Coleman. The use of her new name sent a strange thrill through her. She was Catherine Coleman now, wife of James Coleman, stepmother to Grace and Faith Coleman. It was a role she had agreed to play for 6 months. But sitting here in the quiet parlor with Cole beside her and the piano waiting to be restored, it felt like something more. It felt like coming home. The weeks that followed their quiet wedding settled into a rhythm that felt almost natural. Catherine spent her mornings teaching the twins, her afternoons working on the piano with tools Cole had ordered from Helena, and her evenings sitting by the fire while Cole read reports from his ranch managers or correspondence from his business partners in San Francisco. To anyone watching, they looked like a normal family. But at night, when the house grew quiet, Catherine lay awake in her separate room and wondered what it would be like if the arrangement were real. If Cole looked at her with something more than gratitude and respect. If the girls called her mama without the qualification of pretend. She was tuning the piano's highest octave on a cold February morning when Mrs. Yang entered the parlor, her face troubled. Miss Catherine, there is a man at the door. He says he is a lawyer from Helena. He has papers for Mr. Cole. Catherine's stomach dropped. She set down her tuning hammer and went to find Cole, who was in his study reviewing the ranch's account books. There's a lawyer here, she said quietly from the doorway. Cole looked up, his expression immediately guarded. Did he say what he wants? Just that he has papers for you. They went to the front door together. The man waiting there was tall and thin, dressed in an expensive suit that looked out of place against the rough frontier backdrop. He held a leather satchel and his expression was coolly professional. Mr. James Coleman, that's me. My name is Samuel Whitmore. I'm an attorney from Helena. I've been retained by the investment group that holds minority shares in Coleman Ranch Holdings. I'm here to serve you with notice of a competency hearing. He pulled a sheaf of papers from his satchel and handed them to Cole. Cole's face went pale as he read. They're claiming I'm mentally unfit to manage the business operations, he said, his voice flat. They want the territorial court to appoint a conservator to oversee my decisions. The hearing is scheduled for the 15th of March, Whitmore said. That's 5 weeks from now. You'll need legal representation. I have a lawyer in Helena, Cole said, Jonathan Park. Mr. Park is an excellent attorney, Whitmore acknowledged. I suggest you contact him immediately. After Whitmore left, Cole stood in the hallway staring at the papers in his hands. Catherine could see the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. This is because of Margaret, he said quietly. They think I'm still too broken to function. And maybe they're right. They're not right, Catherine said firmly. You're running this ranch perfectly well. The cattle are healthy, the horses are thriving, the men respect you, but I've been ignoring the business side, the contracts, the expansion plans, the investor reports. I haven't attended a board meeting in over a year. Then we'll fix it. We'll get your records in order. We'll prepare for the hearing. We'll show them you're completely competent. Cole looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You don't have to do this, Catherine. This isn't part of our arrangement. Yes, it is, she said. We agreed to help each other. This is me helping. That afternoon, they sent a telegram to Jonathan Park and Helena. 2 days later, the lawyer arrived at the ranch, a slim man of Korean descent with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. Mr. Coleman, he said after reviewing the documents, this is serious but not insurmountable. They're basing their case on your withdrawal from business operations and your failure to attend meetings or respond to correspondence. We need to demonstrate that you're actively engaged in making sound decisions. How do we do that? First, we need to show that your recent marriage indicates you're moving forward with your life. Mr. Park looked at Catherine. I'll need to interview you, Mrs. Coleman, to establish that this is a genuine marriage and not a sham arrangement. Catherine felt her cheeks flush. Of course. Second, we need to document all the ranch operations. Show that under your management, The property is profitable and well run. Third, you need to start attending to the business matters you've been neglecting. Review those contracts, respond to that correspondence, make yourself visible as an active manager. Cole nodded slowly. I can do that. There's one more thing, Park said. The investors are going to argue that your judgment is impaired. They may bring up your wife's unusual arrival in Montana. They may suggest that you married too quickly, that it shows poor decision-making. Let them try, Catherine said before Cole could respond. I'll testify if needed. I'll explain exactly how we met and why we married. There's nothing shameful in any of it. Park smiled slightly. Good. We'll need that fighting spirit. After the lawyer left, Cole turned to Catherine. You don't have to testify. You don't have to put yourself through that scrutiny. I'm your wife, Catherine said. Even if it's only on paper, I'm not going to stand aside while they attack you. Cole looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached out and took her hand. It was the first time he had touched her since their wedding day kiss. His palm was warm and calloused against hers. Thank you, he said quietly, for all of this, for being here. Where else would I be? That night, Catherine couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the hearing, about what might happen if Cole lost control of his ranch, about what it would mean for the girls if their father was declared incompetent. She was standing at her bedroom window, looking out at the moonlit snow, when she heard footsteps in the hall. A moment later, there was a soft knock on her door. Catherine? Cole's voice was low. Are you awake? She opened the door. He stood there in his nightshirt and trousers, his hair disheveled. I couldn't sleep, he said. I keep thinking about the hearing, about what happens if I lose. You won't lose. You don't know that. No, Catherine admitted, but I believe it. Cole ran a hand through his hair. Can I tell you something? Something I haven't told anyone? Of course, after Margaret died, there were days when I couldn't get out of bed. Days when Red had to handle everything because I couldn't function. The girls would cry for their mother, and I couldn't comfort them because I was drowning in my own grief. I was failing at everything, the ranch, the business, being a father. Everything. But you didn't give up, Catherine said softly. Only because I didn't have a choice. The girls needed me. The ranch needed me. So I kept going even when I wanted to stop. But maybe the investors are right. Maybe I am broken beyond repair. You're not broken, Catherine said fiercely. You're healing. There's a difference. Am I? Because some days I still feel like I'm drowning. Then let me help you stay afloat. Cole looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. You already do, he said quietly. More than you know. They stood there in the doorway, so close Catherine could feel the warmth radiating from his body. For a moment she thought he might kiss her. Really kiss her. Not the polite brush of lips they had shared at their wedding. But then he stepped back. I should let you sleep, he said. I'm sorry for disturbing you. You didn't disturb me, Catherine said. I'm glad you came. After he left, Catherine sat on her bed with her heart pounding. Something was changing between them. Something that had nothing to do with their arrangement and everything to do with genuine feeling. It terrified her. 3 days passed in uneasy awareness. Catherine and Cole were careful around each other, polite but distant, both afraid to acknowledge what was growing between them. Then, on the 4th morning, everything changed. Catherine was helping Faith with her letters when Grace ran into the parlor, her face flushed with excitement. Miss Catherine, there's a fancy carriage coming up the road. Catherine went to the window. Sure enough, an expensive covered carriage was approaching the house. It was out of place in the rough Montana landscape, clearly built for city streets rather than frontier roads. Cole emerged from his study, his expression wary. Were you expecting anyone? No, Catherine said, but even as she spoke, a cold dread began to settle in her stomach. The carriage stopped in front of the house. A man stepped out, and Catherine's worst fears were confirmed. It was Marcus Welling. He looked exactly as she remembered from the daguerreotype he had sent her. Tall and handsome, with perfectly styled hair and expensive clothes. He carried himself with the confidence of a man who had never been told no in his life. Behind him stepped another man, older and harder looking, with the bearing of someone used to violence. Catherine felt Cole move to stand beside her. His hand found hers and squeezed. Stay here, he said quietly. Let me handle this. No, Catherine said. We handle this together. They walked out onto the porch. Marcus smiled when he saw Catherine, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Catherine, my dear, there you are. I've been so worried about you. Mr. Welling, Catherine said coldly, what are you doing here? I've come to take you home, of course. Marcus gestured to the man behind him. This is Mr. Victor Kane. He's a private investigator I hired to help locate you. I was quite concerned when you didn't respond to my letter. I didn't respond because I have nothing to say to you, Catherine said. Now, Catherine, don't be like that. I explained about the misunderstanding with the telegram. Marcus's voice was smooth, reasonable. We can still move forward with our wedding plans. I understand time is of the essence given your grandmother's will. Cole stepped forward. I think you're laboring under a misunderstanding, Mr. Welling. Miss Morgan is no longer available to marry you. She's already married. To me. Marcus's smile faltered. His eyes darted between Cole and Catherine. That's impossible. It's very possible, Cole said. We were married 3 weeks ago by Judge Henry Blake in Billings. It's all perfectly legal and recorded. The smile disappeared completely from Marcus's face. His expression hardened into something ugly. I see, he said. How very convenient. Tell me, Mr. Coleman, did your new wife mention the $12,000 she stands to inherit? Is that what motivated this sudden marriage? Our reasons for marrying are our own business, Cole said evenly. I think not, Marcus said. He pulled a folded document from his coat. You see, I've taken the liberty of consulting with several lawyers about this matter, and they've informed me that Catherine signed a contract with me 2 years ago. A promise of marriage that is legally binding in several territories, including Montana. That's a lie, Catherine said. I never signed anything. Marcus unfolded the document and held it up. The contract appeared to have Catherine's signature at the bottom, along with Marcus's and 2 witnesses. Catherine stared at it in disbelief. That's not my signature. That's a forgery, is it? Marcus smiled. I think you'll find it's quite authentic. And if you married Mr. Coleman while under contract to me, then your marriage is void, which means you'll fail to meet the terms of your grandmother's will. Cole's hand tightened on Catherine's. Let me see that document. Marcus handed it over with a smug expression. Cole studied it carefully, then passed it to Catherine. She looked at the signature. It did look remarkably like her handwriting, but she knew with absolute certainty that she had never signed such a document. This is a fraud, she said. I never signed this. Prove it, Marcus said. Take me to court if you like, but I suspect Judge Blake will be very interested to learn that you committed bigamy. That's a crime, Mrs. Coleman. Or should I say, Miss Morgan? The man Victor Kane, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Mr. Welling also wanted me to mention that he's prepared to file charges of fraud against Mr. Coleman for entering into a sham marriage to help Miss Morgan claim her inheritance illegally. Cole's face went dark with anger. Get off my property. Now, or what? Marcus asked. You'll shoot me? In front of witnesses? That would only prove what I've been saying, that you're mentally unstable. Cole took a step forward, but Catherine grabbed his arm. Don't, she said quietly. That's what he wants. Marcus smiled again. Smart girl. Always were smarter. Then you looked. Now here's what's going to happen. Catherine is going to annul her marriage to you, Mr. Coleman. She's going to return to Billings with me. We'll be married before her birthday, and she'll keep her inheritance. And you'll quietly withdraw any claims you might have on her or her property. And if we refuse, Catherine asked, then I'll pursue charges of bigamy and fraud. I'll make sure everyone in Montana knows that you're a liar and a cheat. And I'll make sure Mr. Coleman here loses not only his competency hearing, but any chance of maintaining custody of his daughters. After all, what kind of father exposes his children to a woman of such poor moral character? Faith and Grace, who had been watching from the window, chose that moment to run outside. Grace attached herself to Catherine's leg, while Faith hid behind Cole. Mama. Catherine, why is that man being mean? Grace asked. Marcus's eyebrows rose. Mama, Catherine? How touching. And how quickly you have insinuated yourself into this family, my dear. Don't speak to her like that, Cole said dangerously. I'll speak however I like. Marcus turned to leave. You have until the end of the week to make your decision, Catherine. After that, I'll proceed with legal action. He and Kane climbed back into their carriage and drove away, leaving Catherine and Cole standing on the porch with the girls clinging to them. That night, after the girls were finally settled into bed, after hours of questions and fears, Cole and Catherine sat in his study. Jonathan Park had arrived within hours of receiving their urgent telegram and was now reviewing the forged contract. "This is definitely a forgery," Park said. "The signature is close but not perfect. And the witnesses listed here, I can verify that at least one of them was in San Francisco on the date this was supposedly signed in Boston." "Can you prove it in court?" Cole asked. "I can try, but it will take time." "Time you don't have." Park looked at Catherine. "Your birthday is in 8 weeks. If Welling files his lawsuit and it goes to trial, you could easily miss the deadline." "Then what do we do?" Catherine asked. Park was quiet for a moment. "There is one option. We could make the marriage real." "It is real," Cole said. "We're legally married. I mean consummated. Make it a genuine marriage in every sense. If you can testify under oath that the marriage is real, that you've been living as husband and wife, it would be much harder for Welling to claim it's a sham." Catherine felt her face flush. "You're suggesting—" "I'm suggesting you consider all your options," Park said delicately. "A marriage that's been consummated is much more difficult to annul than one that hasn't." After Park left to find lodging in town, Cole and Catherine sat in uncomfortable silence. "You don't have to do that," Cole said finally. "What Park suggested. I won't ask that of you." "I know," Catherine said quietly. But, but maybe he's right. Maybe that's the only way to protect what we've built here." She looked at him. "I don't want to lose this, Cole. The girls, the ranch, this life. It's more real to me than anything I had in Boston ever was." Cole stood and walked to the window. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "You have to understand something, Catherine. I haven't been with anyone since Margaret died. I haven't wanted to be. The thought of touching another woman felt like a betrayal. And now I'm married to a woman who's kind and brave and beautiful. A woman my daughters adore. A woman who's brought music back into this house." He turned to look at her, "And the thought of touching you doesn't feel like betrayal anymore. It feels like possibility." Catherine's breath caught. "Cole, but I won't do this unless you want it too. Not just to save the inheritance or win the court case. I need to know that you want me, that this is real for you." Catherine stood and walked to him. She took his hand and placed it over her heart. He could feel it racing beneath his palm. "It's real," she whispered. "I didn't expect it to be. But it is." Cole cupped her face with his other hand. His thumb traced her cheekbone. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." He kissed her then. Not the polite brush of lips from their wedding, but a real kiss, deep and hungry, and full of all the longing they had both been suppressing. Catherine's arms went around his neck, and she pressed herself against him, feeling the solid strength of his body. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "Not here," he said. "Not in my study where anyone could walk in." He took her hand and led her upstairs to his bedroom. It was larger than Catherine's room, with a big bed and a fireplace and windows that looked out over the mountains. Cole locked the door and turned to face her. The moonlight coming through the windows turned his hair silver. Catherine's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "We can stop at any time," Cole said. "Just say the word. I don't want to stop." He crossed the room to her and began unbuttoning her dress with shaking fingers. Catherine helped him, her own hands trembling. When the dress pulled at her feet and she stood before him in just her chemise and stockings, Cole's breath hitched. "You're beautiful," he said hoarsely. "So are you." She helped him remove his shirt, running her hands over the solid muscle of his chest and shoulders. He was all hard planes and strength, marked here and there with scars from a lifetime of ranch work. What they did next was tender and awkward and absolutely perfect. Cole was gentle with her, patient, guiding her through the intimacy with whispered words of encouragement. When it was over, they lay tangled together in his bed, Catherine's head on his chest, his arm around her shoulders. "No going back now," Cole said quietly. "No," Catherine agreed. "No going back." She didn't know if she was talking about the legal implications or about her heart. Probably both. The next morning, Catherine woke in Cole's bed with sunlight streaming through the windows. He was already awake, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Good morning, wife," he said. "Good morning, husband." He kissed her forehead. "We should get up. The girls will be looking for you. Let them look for a few more minutes." Cole smiled and pulled her closer. "I could get used to this. The arrangement? This. Having you here. Waking up with you. Is it so different from the arrangement?" Everything's different now, Cole said. You know that, don't you? Yes, Catherine said. I know. They were interrupted by pounding on the bedroom door. Papa! Miss Catherine, Grace's voice was urgent. Mr. Park is here, and he says it's important. Cole and Catherine dressed quickly and hurried downstairs. Park was waiting in the parlor, his face grim. Welling has filed his lawsuit, he said without preamble. He's claiming fraud, bigamy, and conspiracy to defraud. And he's also filed a complaint with the territorial court supporting the investor's claim that you're mentally incompetent, Mr. Coleman. Can he do that? Catherine asked. He can file whatever he wants. Whether he wins is another matter. Park pulled out more papers. But there's something else. Something I think you should know, Miss Catherine. What? Your grandmother's will has a second condition that wasn't mentioned in the initial letter. You have to marry someone of good moral character and sound judgment. Welling is arguing that Mr. Coleman fails both criteria, that he's mentally unstable and that he entered into a fraudulent marriage. So even if we stay married, I could still lose the inheritance? Catherine felt the room spin. Possibly, but I have an idea. Park looked between them. How would you feel about a very public demonstration of your marriage? What do you mean? I mean, we make it impossible for anyone to claim this marriage is fake. We have a second ceremony, a real wedding with the whole town invited. We show everyone that you're genuinely committed to each other, and then at the competency hearing, we present your marriage as evidence of Mr. Coleman's sound judgment and stable mental state. Cole and Catherine looked at each other. Another wedding, a real one this time, with witnesses and vows that meant something. All right, Catherine said, let's do it. The second wedding was held 3 weeks later on a Sunday afternoon in early March. The entire population of Billings seemed to have turned out, along with ranchers and farmers from miles around. Someone had decorated the ranch house with evergreen boughs and white ribbons. Mrs. Yang had baked a cake that stood 3 tiers high. Catherine wore a dress that Mrs. Yang and 3 other women from town had sewn together in just 2 weeks. It was cream-colored silk with lace at the collar and cuffs. Not as fine as her mother's Paris dress, but beautiful in its simplicity. Grace and Faith were flower girls, scattering dried rose petals from Margaret's garden that Mrs. Yang had saved in sachets. They took their duties very seriously, walking with slow, careful steps and speaking in important whispers. Cole stood at the front of the parlor in a new suit, looking more nervous than Catherine had ever seen him. When she walked toward him on Red Harrison's arm, his eyes never left her face. Judge Blake performed the ceremony, just as he had the first time. But this time, when he asked Cole to repeat his vows, Cole spoke from his heart. Catherine, when you stepped off that train in your ruined wedding dress, I thought I was just helping a stranger in need. I had no idea you would become the most important person in my life. You've brought light back into this house. You've taught my daughters how to smile again. You've taught me that it's possible to love again, even after losing everything. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. I love you, not because of any arrangement or any inheritance or any legal necessity. I love you because you're brave and you make me want to be a better man. I promise to honor you and cherish you for the rest of my life. Catherine's eyes filled with tears as she spoke her own vows. Cole, you saved my life that day at the station. You gave me a home when I had nowhere to go. You trusted me with your daughters when you had every reason to trust no one. You've shown me that love isn't about grand gestures or pretty words. It's about showing up every day and choosing each other over and over again. Her voice broke. I love you. I loved you before I admitted it to myself. I'll love you long after the reasons we first married have faded into memory. I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes, to be your partner and your friend and your love. When Judge Blake pronounced them husband and wife, Cole pulled Catherine into his arms and kissed her thoroughly, to the cheers and applause of everyone watching. The celebration lasted well into the evening. There was food and music and dancing. Someone had brought a fiddle and another man had a harmonica. People danced in the parlor and spilled out onto the porch despite the cold. Catherine danced with Cole, with Red Harrison, with Judge Blake, with farmers and ranchers whose names she was still learning. But she kept coming back to Cole, drawn to him like a compass to true north. Near midnight, as the party was winding down, Cole pulled her aside. Come with me. I want to show you something. He led her out to the barn, to the stall where his finest mare was kept. The horse was heavily pregnant, due to foal any day. Margaret loved this mare, Cole said, stroking the animal's neck. She named her Bella, said she was the most beautiful thing on the ranch besides our daughters. She's lovely. When Bella foals, I want you to name the baby. Cole turned to face Catherine. I want you to put your mark on this place. Make it yours as well as mine. It already feels like mine, Catherine said. More than Boston ever did. Good, because I don't ever want you to feel like you have to leave. Arrangement or no arrangement. Inheritance or no inheritance. I want you here. Always. Always is a long time. Not long enough. 2 days later, Marcus made his final play. He arrived at the ranch with Victor Kane and a third man who identified himself as a federal marshal. Mr. Coleman, the marshal said, I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of fraud and conspiracy. On what grounds? Cole demanded. On the grounds that you entered into a fraudulent marriage for the purpose of helping Miss Morgan illegally claim an inheritance. Mr. Welling has provided substantial evidence. That marriage is completely legal, Catherine said. We were married by a judge. The first marriage, maybe, the marshal said. But Mr. Welling claims you were already under contract to him at the time, which would make your marriage to Mr. Coleman void from the start. That contract is a forgery, Catherine said desperately. That's for the court to decide. The marshal pulled out handcuffs. Mr. Coleman, you need to come with me. No, Catherine grabbed Cole's arm. You can't arrest him. He hasn't done anything wrong. Papa! Faith's scream pierced the air. She and Grace had been watching from the window, and now they came running outside. Don't take our papa. The marshal hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the crying children. Cole knelt down and pulled both girls into his arms. It's going to be all right, he told them, though his face was white. Mama Catherine is going to take care of you, and Mr. Park is going to fix this. I'll be home soon. You promise? Grace asked through her tears. I promise. But even as he said it, Cole's eyes met Catherine's over the girls' heads, and she could see the fear there, the uncertainty. As the marshal led Cole away in handcuffs, with Marcus watching with barely concealed satisfaction, Catherine held the sobbing twins and felt rage unlike anything she had ever known. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. She sent an urgent message to Jonathan Park and then spent the rest of the day comforting the girls and trying to hold herself together. That evening, Park arrived with news. I've been investigating Welling, he said, and I've found something interesting. His bank is under federal investigation for predatory lending practices. Apparently, he's been foreclosing on properties and reselling them for profit. Can we use that? Maybe, but there's more. Park pulled out a telegram. I contacted the real Mr. Edward Harrington in Boston. He confirms that the letter Welling sent you about the inheritance was genuine, but he never sent any communication to the territorial court claiming your marriage was fraudulent. That was Welling impersonating him. That's a federal crime, Catherine said. It is indeed. Park smiled grimly. I've already contacted the U.S. Marshal's office. They're very interested in speaking with Mr. Welling. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. Catherine spent the days preparing her testimony, going over every detail of her relationship with Cole with Jonathan Park. She also wrote a long letter to the real Edward Harrington, explaining everything and asking him to send an affidavit confirming the legitimacy of her marriage. On the day of the hearing, the courtroom in Helena was packed. Catherine sat in the front row with Mrs. Yang and the twins. Cole sat at the defendant's table with Park beside him. Marcus was there too, looking confident and smug. But Catherine noticed Victor Tone was absent, and when the proceedings began, she understood why. Before we hear testimony, Judge William Crawford said, I have some new evidence that's been brought to my attention. A door opened and a federal marshal entered, followed by a Victor Kane. But Kane wasn't walking in as a witness, he was in handcuffs. What's the meaning of this? Marcus half rose from his seat. Mr. Kane has agreed to cooperate with federal investigators, the judge said. In exchange for leniency, he's provided testimony about your activities, Mr. Welling, including the forged contract and the impersonation of a Boston attorney. Marcus's face went white. Those are lies. He paid Kane to say that. Mr. Kane has provided documentary evidence, the judge said, including the original letter you asked him to forge and receipts for payments made to the witnesses you hired to sign it. The courtroom erupted. Marcus tried to speak, but the judge gavelled for silence. "The charges against Mr. Coleman are hereby dismissed," Judge Crawford said. "Furthermore, I'm ordering Mr. Welling held for trial on charges of fraud, forgery, and impersonation of a federal officer." As marshals moved to arrest Marcus, he turned to Catherine with hatred blazing in his eyes. "You'll regret this," he snarled. "Both of you." "I don't think so," Catherine said calmly. "I think the only person who'll have regrets is you." As they led Marcus away, Cole reached for Catherine's hand. She squeezed it tight, feeling the weight of months of fear finally lifting. But they weren't done yet. There was still the competency hearing. The investors' lawyers presented their case, arguing that Cole's withdrawal from business operations and his hasty marriage showed impaired judgment. Then it was Jonathan Park's turn. He called witness after witness. Red Harrison testified about how well the ranch was run. The ranch's accountant presented financial records showing healthy profits. Judge Blake testified about Cole's character and the legitimacy of his marriage. And then Park called Catherine to the stand. "Mrs. Coleman," he said, "tell the court about your marriage to the defendant." Catherine took a deep breath. "My husband and I married under unusual circumstances," she began. "I won't deny that. I came to Montana expecting to marry someone else. That man betrayed me and left me stranded with nothing." She looked directly at the investor's lawyer. "Mr. Coleman offered me employment as a governess for his daughters. As I got to know him and his family, I came to respect him deeply. When we learned about the terms of my grandmother's will, we made a practical decision to marry. But what started as a practical arrangement became real very quickly." "How can the court be sure of that?" the lawyer asked. "Because I love him," Catherine said simply. "I love him and his daughters with everything I have. I would have married him even without the inheritance, even without the legal pressures, because he's the finest man I've ever known." She turned to look at Cole. "Because he's patient and kind and strong, because he takes care of his people, because he's teaching me every day what real love looks like, not the pretty words and empty promises I got from Marcus Welling, but the kind of love that shows up in actions, the kind that builds a life together." The courtroom was silent when she finished. Even the investor's lawyer seemed at a loss for words. The judge called a recess to deliberate. Cole and Catherine waited in the hallway, holding hands and not speaking. The twins sat on either side of them, Grace chattering nervously while Faith stayed quiet. After an hour, they were called back in. Judge Crawford looked tired, but his voice was firm. "I've reviewed all the evidence presented," he said, "and I find no basis for the claim that Mr. Coleman is mentally incompetent. The ranch is profitable and well managed. His recent marriage, while unconventional in its origins, appears to be genuine and stable. The court rules in favor of the defendant. Mr. Coleman retains full control of his business operations." The courtroom erupted in applause. Cole pulled Catherine into his arms and held her tight. Over his shoulder, she could see the investors' lawyers gathering their papers with sour expressions. They had won. Against Marcus, against the investors, against everyone who had tried to tear them apart. That night, back at the ranch, after the girls were finally asleep and Mrs. Yang had retired to her room, Cole and Catherine sat together on the porch despite the cold. "I got a telegram today," Catherine said, "from Edward Harrington, the real one. And my inheritance is secure. Marcus's fraud has been documented. I'll receive the full amount on my birthday next month. That's wonderful." Cole was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "So you don't need to stay married to me anymore. You've got your money. I've won my hearing. We could annul the marriage if you wanted." Catherine turned to look at him. "Is that what you want?" "God, no." Cole pulled her close. "I want you to stay. Not because of any arrangement, not because of the girls or the ranch or anything else. I want you to stay because I love you and I can't imagine my life without you anymore." "Good," Catherine said, "because I'm not going anywhere, you're sure. Because I need you to be sure. I can't—" He stopped, his voice breaking. "I can't lose someone else I love." "You're not gonna lose me," Catherine said fiercely. "I'm here, I'm staying, for as long as you'll have me." "Forever then," Cole said. "I'll have you forever." He kissed her under the Montana stars, and Catherine felt something settle in her chest. Something that had been restless and searching for as long as she could remember. She had found her home, not in a place but in this man and his daughters, in the life they were building together from the ashes of their separate sorrows. The months that followed were the happiest Catherine had ever known. She received her inheritance on her 25th birthday, all $12,000 deposited safely in the Billings Bank under her own name. She immediately invested half of it into expanding Coleman Ranch's horse breeding program. Together, she and Cole purchased additional land, built new stables, and hired expert trainers from Kentucky. The business flourished beyond their wildest expectations. Within 6 months, Coleman Ranch had become the most sought-after supplier of cavalry horses west of the Mississippi. Contracts poured in not just from the Army, but from ranchers, postal services, and wealthy families across the territories. Grace and Faith thrived under Catherine's patient care. The wild, grieving children who had once terrorized governesses were now confident young ladies who could read Shakespeare, play piano, and ride better than most grown men. They still called her Mama Catherine, and Catherine's heart swelled with pride every time she heard it. And Catherine herself had transformed. No longer the heartbroken woman who had knelt in the snow at Billings Station, she had become a respected businesswoman, a loving mother, and a true partner to Cole in every sense. The life they had built together was richer than any inheritance. 1 year later, Catherine stood in the barn watching Cole deliver a foal from Bella. The birth was difficult and took hours, but finally a perfect colt emerged, all spindly legs and dark eyes. "He's beautiful," Catherine breathed. "What should we name him?" Cole asked, remembering his promise. "Phoenix," Catherine said. "For rising from the ashes." Cole smiled and kissed her. "Perfect." Grace and Faith, now 6 years old and reading at a third-grade level, were jumping up and down with excitement. "Can we pet him? Can we, please?" "In a little while," Catherine said. "Let him get his bearings first." She rested her hand on her own belly, still flat but not for long. She and Cole had decided to wait to tell the girls until she was further along. But soon there would be another child in the Coleman house. A new beginning built on the foundation of everything they had survived. That evening, Catherine found a box in the attic while looking for baby clothes. Inside was a letter in Margaret's handwriting. It was addressed simply, "To whoever comes after me." Catherine's hands trembled as she opened it. "To the woman who will love my family after I'm gone," it began. "If you're reading this, it means I'm no longer here and my precious girls are growing up without me. This breaks my heart more than any words can express. To you, whoever you are, please don't try to replace me. You can't and you shouldn't try. But please love my daughters as if they were born from your own body. Love my husband even when he pushes you away. He will be broken for a very long time. I don't know who you are, but I trust Cole to choose someone worthy. And if my girls love you, then I love you too. Tell them about me sometimes. Not so much that I become a ghost haunting this house, but enough that they remember I was real. Let me live in their smiles, not in their tears. There's a necklace in this box. Please wear it. It's my way of welcoming you into this family. Thank you for being brave enough to love a family that was shattered. Thank you for picking up the pieces I had to leave behind. With gratitude, hope, and love, Margaret Rose Coleman. Catherine found the necklace wrapped in tissue paper. It was simple but beautiful, a ruby pendant on a gold chain. She fastened it around her neck with tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, Margaret," she whispered. "Thank you for trusting me with them." That night, she showed the letter to Cole. He read it in silence, tears rolling down his cheeks. Then he pulled Catherine into his arms and held her for a long time. "She would have loved you," he said finally. "She would have been so grateful you came into our lives. I hope I'm honoring her memory. You are. Every single day." They stood together looking out the window at the ranch that had become Catherine's home, at the mountains in the distance, in the stars overhead, at the life they had built from the ruins of their separate heartbreaks. Some stories end with a kiss at the altar. Some end with a sunset ride into the distance. But the best stories, the truest stories, end with something simpler and more profound. They end with belonging. And Catherine Morgan Coleman, the rejected bride who had fallen to her knees at a train station one frozen December day, had finally, completely found where she belonged.